afternoon, everybody. My name is Dee France. You're very welcome to the first webinar session that we're having for the autumn season. Everybody's very keen. We've big numbers signed up for this today, so we're delighted. It's obviously something that's of interest to a lot of people. I think as we launch into the kind of the autumn season, it is all about finding that work-life balance, and it feels like it's kind of back to school and head down for Christmas until Christmas. But look, any tips and tricks that we can get off Gillian will be of help today. So I'm delighted to be joined today by the chair of the ACA committee, and obviously I'm just to give you a quick intro for myself from Thrive Wellbeing. So myself and the team at Thrive, we look after all the wellbeing needs of our members and our students. And Thrive, just to remind people and anyone that's new joining today, provides a host of wellbeing supports for our members and our students, including a confidential listening service, counselling with a qualified therapist, wellness coaching, and webinars and events such as this. So you can check out our hub for lots of the latest content and news and all the up and coming events as well. We have something coming out for World Wellbeing Day on the 10th of October. So keep an eye on the calendar there and you can sign up. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Joseph Grant, who is the chair, as I say, of the ACA committee this year. And we're delighted to collaborate with Joseph and the committee. So I'll hand over to Joseph for a moment to introduce himself and tell you a few more things about the activities going on there. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today, and thanks for the introduction, Dee. A big thank you as well to Gillian for coming along today. So my name is Joseph Grant. I'm the current chair of the ACA Professionals. I just wanted to come along today really to give an introduction of myself and the ACA Professionals Committee for those who may not have heard of it. So our main aim really is to support members right from the newly qualified mark right up to 10-year post-qualified. So whether that's networking, CPD, or just providing social events for our members to meet other members. So we do have events running throughout the year, and you can find these on the Chartered Accountants Ireland website, on LinkedIn, and on our Instagram page. It's great to be collaborating today with Thrive to kick off the new term. We will be having some in-person events throughout the year. The next one will be the mentoring event on 26th of September and our annual Connections event, which is coming up later in the year, and the details will be coming out shortly on that. So just keep an eye out on social media for this. With that, I'm just going to hand back to Dee and hope you all enjoyed the rest of the webinar, and I hope to meet you all in person soon. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Joseph. That's great. So now I'm delighted to welcome our speaker of the day, Gillian Bane. So Gillian is in a unique position of understanding the huge time constraints our members and our students experience, as Gillian herself is a qualified member of over nearly 10 years. Gillian is now the founder of WellWork 360 and is an expert in the area of team productivity, energy management, and workplace wellness culture. So just before I hand over to Gillian, please feel free to add any questions into the Q&A section, and we're going to have a chat at the end. So without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Gillian, and you're very welcome. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, Dee, for the introduction and for having me here today. As I said, I'm a chartered accountant, so I'm kind of very passionate about trying to improve kind of the health and well-being of the profession. So hopefully I can kind of help you in some kind of way today. And look, I know obviously everyone's super busy and sometimes it's kind of really kind of hard to kind of like squeeze something like this in, especially maybe on your lunch. So hopefully for the next maybe like 45 minutes or so, you can kind of shut off the emails, put the work down, and kind of just like focus this time on kind of you and kind of how you're feeling. And hopefully you'll kind of get some tips on kind of how to better manage your energy. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, kind of how we can better manage our kind of energy. And I'm going to start with just a little quick introduction about myself. We're going to dive into really kind of, what energy management is. And then we're going to really kind of talk about how to strategies and how to manage this. And this is kind of a combination of, identifying what our energy drainers are and how we kind of counteract that, but also kind of how we boost our energy. And this is kind of mainly kind of throughout the workday and at work, but we kind of will touch on a personal life as well. And then we're going to finish with a Q&A. So if you do have any questions, kind of feel free to kind of pop them in the chat box. So I'm going to start with a little background about myself. As you said, I'm a chartered accountant, but I'm also a workplace health and wellbeing consultant. And there's obviously kind of like, a reason for that transition. So like many of you, I would have trained in the Big Four in PwC Dublin. And then I kind of moved into industry and I worked in the US and London. And then unfortunately, a few years ago, I suffered from a very severe case of work-related burnout. I was very unwell, had to take a lot of time off work, and I was really kind of struggling with symptoms like chronic fatigue, depression, and anxiety. And it was kind of real kind of turning point for me because, I had to really kind of ask myself a lot of questions because, I actually would have considered myself quite a health conscious person. And then kind of suddenly and physically I was the fittest I'd ever been. And in the space of maybe like a year, I went from, having the energy to kind of run a half marathon to kind of probably not being able to go for more than like a 10-minute walk for a good 6 months. And really kind of, at kind of the root of that was kind of stress that kind of caused that, and stress that kind of became chronic in nature. And it kind of arose due from kind of the demands of kind of my working environment. So it kind of made me very kind of passionate about first getting myself kind of back kind of into a healthier kind of state, but then trying to improve this sort of thing in the workplace. So I went back and I studied a master's in leadership in workplace health and wellbeing. And I did a lot of research on the accounting profession, and especially kind of stuff like culture and stress. I know the impact that kind of has on our mental health. So then when I finished my master's, I decided to set up my own kind of consultancy, Work 360. And really kind of my goal is to kind of help people and to try to make organizations a bit healthier. And I suppose kind of how I try to do this is, I kind of look at, the root cause of kind of issues like work-related stress and burnout, and try to find effective solutions for that. Because I think, sometimes in the workplace wellbeing space, it can be kind of very much focused on, helping the individual cope or maybe getting them back to kind of speed if they're unwell. But we kind of need to look kind of at the wider picture, and because it's kind of stuff like, our work that impacts their health and our kind of stress, our team dynamics, and then at an organization level, things kind of like leadership and culture. And while today's talk, it is kind of focused on you, an individual, and what you can do, I kind of will touch on kind of the wider work environment. And I suppose moving on to the topic of energy management, and I suppose why it became important to me, kind of again, when I was kind of suffering from kind of chronic fatigue. And it's kind of really only when I had such little energy that I kind of realized that, what added to it and kind of what took away from it. And so I kind of had to build strategies to kind of first, like in my personal life, to kind of get myself back to a healthier state. But then also I kind of had to develop these kind of strategies kind of in the workplace. And really kind of what energy management is, the practice of consciously managing and optimizing our energy throughout the workday to maintain this kind of overall state of kind of health and well-being. And really kind of what we're trying to avoid, and look, we've all been there, is, we kind of get to the end of the day and like we're just absolutely wrecked, like we're absolutely drained. And we're all really kind of fit to do is just kind of collapse on the couch. And look, we're all going to probably have some of those days. But we kind of hope that these are kind of like, the exception and not the rule. But if they are the rule, then, you're in the right place. Hopefully you can kind of learn some tips on kind of how to manage that. And kind of this topic about, how we manage our energy at work is kind of, it's kind of grown kind of more attention over the last few years. And I've included kind of just a reference to kind of a few studies that have been done. So one kind of looked at, so they did this kind of randomized control trial. And for those kind of employees that had been given kind of energy management training, they kind of showed significant improvements in their quality of life and well-being over a 6-month period compared to those who didn't. So that kind of just shows that, sometimes we can kind of dismiss these things as being kind of very fluffy, but these actually have kind of tangible results on your well-being, and the studies to kind of prove that. So if you kind of look at like the different types of energy we kind of see in the workplace, there's kind of physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual, and that's kind of one study kind of highlighted. And if you kind of think about this energy, kind of like an accounting setting. So for physical, like, look, we kind of have a desk job, we're not that physical. So we kind of really need to make sure in our personal lives, we kind of can balance that out. For mental, so again, this is a key strength of ours. We can look at very kind of complex work, but that can be quite taxing. So it's important that we kind of have those kind of mental strategies to balance that out. Emotional, and this is kind of something that kind of took me by a little bit surprise over the last few years, because if you think of kind of like accountants, we're very logical, and we kind of don't really kind of have that, I suppose, that caring profession like you'd have a social worker or like a therapist. But one thing we do have is we have a very kind of high pressure kind of environment, and with that becomes a kind of a lot of kind of big emotions. And it's one thing I can speak personally of, but also what I saw in my research is, we're not very good at actually kind of speaking up about that. We might say we're stressed, but we're kind of not saying, look, I'm struggling, I need help, maybe my workload needs to change. And that's something I do think we need to work on and kind of reduce that stigma around that and speaking up. And the next we kind of move on to social, and again I think that's a really key strength of the profession. Like we've kind of always been good at like connecting with others, working as a team, working with clients or stakeholders. But one thing I suppose COVID might have kind of impacted this over the last few years, and with hybrid working we kind of do have less social interaction, so it's kind of really important that we kind of consciously make sure we're still kind of getting that kind of social energy from work. And the last one is spiritual. And so by spiritual, like I don't want to kind of lose people and think this is kind of religious, because some people are, some people aren't. That's absolutely fine. This is kind of more, like how you kind of get your meaning and your purpose from your work. And I think as accountants, we take a lot of pride in our work. We're very career driven, which is great. But I think it's also finding that balance about, making sure we kind of get our meaning and purpose from kind of other sources, so we can really kind of have that kind of work-life balance and kind of meaningful life. So really we kind of we look at, how do we actually manage our energy? And we're going to look at 3 strategies. So the first is, just really understanding where our energy levels are at. And the second we'll look at, what drains our energy at work and what we can do to minimize it. And the last one we'll look at, what we can do to actually kind of boost our energy and improve it in a kind of more positive way. And we're going to start by just understanding, I suppose, how much energy kind of we have. And to do this, I'm just going to use a little kind of analogy of a battery. So if you kind of think of any kind of battery kind of you'd use, for example, like your phone. If I'm going out for the day, I will always check and see what percentage I'm at. If I'm at 100%, I'm like, great, happy days. I can use my phone, no bother, without kind of thinking. But if I kind of look and I'm at like 20 or 30%, I kind of like, oh, okay, I can't use my phone as much. I'm going to, like maybe turn it off for a while, turn off Wi-Fi, use it less. But I'll definitely kind of approach my day differently with my phone. And kind of as humans, we shouldn't be any different. Like we should be constantly kind of checking in to make sure, where are we, kind of what percentage are we at? And from there, kind of decide, well, how much do I actually have to kind of give to my work today, and how much do I have to give to my personal life, and kind of, act kind of accordingly. And I've kind of just like, set out a little kind of table here. And it kind of looks at, the different kind of energies and what they may look like if you're at this kind of green, yellow, amber, or red state. And I really this kind of the purpose here is for you to kind of reflect on, can you see kind of which maybe kind of category you kind of fit into, maybe today or in general at work. And look, we all kind of want to be in this kind of green category. So here we have, high energy levels, we're very productive, great mood, lots of kind of good social interactions. But there's day-to-day stressors that can obviously kind of get us into this kind of yellow zone, where maybe we're not sleeping as well, maybe a little bit more forgetful, maybe our mood's going up and down a little bit more. I know our bodies are designed to cope with a certain level of kind of stress, and for that to kind of bring us here. But the key is to, prevent that stress becoming chronic in nature, and especially in the workplace. Because if we don't, we kind of find ourselves in this amber zone, where here is where we're constantly tired, headaches, we're procrastinating a lot, very overwhelmed, and maybe we have a lot of kind of conflict in our social interactions. And I suppose my key learning from my own experience is I probably was kind of in this kind of amber zone quite a lot. One, I probably didn't realize it, but then second, even when I did, I think I was the type of person that I was like, oh no, I just need to get the work done, keep pushing, meet that deadline or whatnot. And unfortunately, that kind of made me kind of slip into this red zone where, I was off work, as I said before, chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety. And the reason I want to kind of bring this up is as well, I know this was my situation, but from my research, I kind of see that like a lot of the people, and probably all of the people that I spoke to, were kind of spending a lot of time in this amber zone. And when I asked them, what are kind of you doing? Would you put your hand up and say you're struggling, or, would you kind of do things focus on your health? They were kind of just like, oh, no, the work needs to get done. And I think that came from a combination of either, you want to be that person that does a good job and progresses in your career, or maybe you just don't want to be the person that maybe can't be seen as they can handle it, or there might be negative consequences if you don't. And this is what we kind of need to change. So yes, we're incredibly hardworking, we have to do overtime, but we need to kind of stop, overworking to the point where being in this kind of amber and red zone is considered kind of normal. So we need to get better at, I suppose, understanding where we're at, having strategies to kind of move ourselves back into this yellow and kind of green zone. And if we do kind of get to this orange zone or amber zone, then we can put up our hand and say, look, I'm struggling and I need to kind of focus on my health first. And look, this kind of is this kind of more of an analogy just for you to roughly kind of see where you are. You can kind of use these colors, or 1 to 10, 1 to 100, but just kind of point out, this isn't medical. This is just more of an assessment for yourself. But if you are concerned with any symptoms you might be experiencing, please do contact your GP. So now we're going to look at, I suppose, strategies to kind of manage our energy and kind of get us back into that kind of yellow and green zone. And we're going to start on looking at what drains our energy and how we can counteract that. Because, even if you're doing like all the right things, sometimes if there's too much of those kind of energy drainage at work, that can just really kind of counteract that and kind of undo all your good work. And I've kind of set out a table here, and it kind of looks at, the energy drainers at different kind of levels of kind of like work. And I've kind of mentioned these before. These are like work, team, organization, individual. So at a work perspective, our energy can be drained from things like, high workload, lots of meetings, long hours. From a team perspective, maybe we're not getting that support from our kind of colleagues. Maybe there's a lot of conflict, or maybe you're having some problems with your manager. And from an organizational perspective, this can be stuff like, poor leadership and culture, or maybe there's a lot of change in your organization, which can be quite stressful. And then at individual level, it kind of comes down to, I suppose, maybe how our personalities kind of come into play, or maybe it's a case that we're just maybe kind of taking breaks, or we're kind of setting ourselves kind of too unrealistic goals. And it's important that we kind of have more of a complete picture of kind of what's driving it. Because again, from my own kind of learning is, if someone kind of asked me a few years ago, what's draining your energy, kind of what's causing you stress, I would be like, oh, it's my workload, the deadlines, the long hours, and like that's absolutely 100% kind of true. But to be honest, what I wasn't aware of, and it's only when I've kind of reflected on, was I suppose, kind of how much of my personality was willing to kind of accept this, but also, from a team dynamic and culture point of view, how that was impacting me as well. And because I kind of wasn't aware of this, I couldn't change it. And change is kind of what we're looking at here, and behavior change. And because so much of our behavior is that kind of we do it kind of automatically, it's subconscious. I know experts and psychologists will estimate this between 90% to 95% of what we do is just kind of automatic without kind of thinking. So if we're kind of trying to make that behavior change, unless we're kind of diving into that 90% and asking ourselves why we kind of feel the way we do, like we're probably not going to have as kind of effective change as we can. And you might be kind of looking at this table, been looking like, oh look, there's a lot of things here that I kind of can't control, and look, that's right. And like in an ideal world, if I was kind of given a topic or a talk on any topic, you'd have a talk for the employees, but you'd have a separate talk for managers and leaders, so that everyone kind of knows what they can kind of influence and control. Because unfortunately, like we just can't kind of wait for other people to kind of maybe solve these. We kind of need to be more proactive and kind of take control of our kind of health. So that's what we're going to focus on. So you as an individual, what can you control or influence? And I'm going to touch on the circles of control, influence, concern. You may already be familiar with this, but we're going to focus on this in the context of managing those kind of energy drainers. And really kind of all what we can focus on is and control is our words, our thoughts, our behaviors, and our actions. And influence is really kind of more just about kind of speaking up, giving feedback, getting help, and focusing on your relationships. And this is where we kind of need to focus our energy on. And so if you look at those kind of previous 4 quadrants and kind of this kind of framework and how they interact, so as an individual, this is what we need to kind of focus on. We need to focus on ourselves and what we can do. For kind of your work and your kind of team dynamics, and again, like you'll probably have less control, and some people have more control than others, but we can all definitely influence this, and this is about kind of more kind of speaking up. From an organizational perspective, look, it does become harder to influence kind of the higher things kind of go up, and there's certain things we might have to be willing to accept, but don't kind of underestimate the power of kind of like giving your feedback, these surveys come around, or informally or formally, because we need to kind of make kind of these kind of issues known if they are kind of issues. And I'm going to touch on what we can control, and your thoughts and your mindset's going to be a huge one here, and really it's really understanding, I suppose, kind of what's driving us, and to do that we kind of need to reflect and kind of ask ourselves why. So a key thing that I kind of ask myself often is, I suppose, what's the story that I'm kind of telling myself? So for that example of kind of what was draining my energy, I'm like, oh yeah, no, it's the overtime, it's the deadlines, and again, that was absolutely true, but like if I can just focus on that, those were things that I couldn't control really. And then, if I kind of be completely honest with myself, like, yes, we all have to kind of work overtime. There's deadlines, that's kind of part of our job. It's in our contract, and certainly like a culture that kind of underpins that. But if I kind of just isolate it back to, sometimes where like, I was said, oh no, I need to work late, or I need to check my emails after work, or maybe work on a Sunday. Sometimes it was very clear, that's what I needed to do, but I had to be honest with myself and say, sometimes it was kind of me that was kind of taking that decision. Either was because like, look, I wanted to do a good job, meet that deadline, be perceived as kind of doing a good job, or sometimes I just didn't want to be perceived as doing a bad job. And when I became like really honest with myself, I could kind of and pinpoint when I was making a decision, it kind of gave me the power to say, well, I actually can make a different decision. And sometimes we need to do that. And particularly if you find yourself like, in that kind of amber zone, sometimes we do need to kind of, put work aside and focus back on our health and what we can kind of do to improve that. And now moving on to kind of action. So this is kind of a key thing here. And really for any of those energy drainers, we can either like eliminate it or minimize it or learn to cope with it. And we'll kind of talk about like how we kind of cope with it later. But one thing I want to talk about here is boundaries. I think boundaries for us kind of as a profession is really, really important. And what a boundary is, it's like a personal rule that kind of protects your time and energy. And it could be boundaries about different things. It could be about, like the hours you work. It could be about, kind of like how kind of conversations go and how you interact. And the key thing here is to kind of understand and kind of tune into kind of what you need and what it is about your kind of health that you need to protect, and kind of establish kind of things around that. And when we do that, it's really, really important that we communicate it. And we don't have to be overly aggressive about it or apologetic about it. We just need to be clear on why it's kind of important for us. And the key here with boundaries is, sometimes we think it's to change how other people act, but it's not. It's to change how we'll act. So, for example, it's a case of, maybe it's not that like your manager's not going to say you have to do X amount of overtime, but it's when you get to that point where you have enough, maybe you need to say, okay, I'm getting up now. I need to kind of finish this day and focus on myself. And it's really kind of important to be kind of consistent here, and get comfortable kind of saying no a little bit more, which I know sometimes can be very, very hard, but I think that's something we need to kind of keep doing, and we really need to kind of have our kind of health at the forefront of our minds. And then moving on to more, okay, so if you can't control something, and like that I mentioned before, there's going to be a lot of things like here that we can't, but we need to know what we can influence. And really what we can do, influence, the key here is communication. And, like in an ideal world, like you'd be, if any of these kind of energy drainers that are kind of grinding on you, like we can kind of, communicate this when we're in the green zone or the yellow zone, and not kind of wait till we kind of get to the amber zone where we're really kind of overwhelmed, we're in the middle of a deadline. So try to kind of be a little bit more proactive about this. And look, I know that's easier said than done. And one of the pieces of the research I did in my master's was, why we don't feel kind of comfortable reporting kind of stress. And look, there's lots of very valid reasons for this. Like we don't see it kind of done very often. There's a stigma around it. We're afraid what people will think, or maybe something might be done about it. And look, they're all very valid reasons, but like, there's a lot of obviously kind of fear there that kind of stops us speaking out. And so it's kind of that toss up between, okay, what's the cost of saying nothing? The cost of saying nothing is you kind of bottling up your feelings. And when you kind of bottle up your feelings, that's kind of a very, very kind of heavy energy, and it can be very draining. So as uncomfortable as it is sometimes to kind of start kind of these conversations, you kind of have to remind yourself it is a skill. And the more you do, it's like a muscle, the stronger you get, the more easier you'll get. So I really kind of would kind of encourage you to try to kind of focus on, can you be a bit more vocal about kind of what's kind of draining your energy at work, and in a more constructive way. So that was kind of more of a framework of how to approach kind of any energy drainer, but I'm going to talk specifically on maybe what's things that we can kind of do during our workday to kind of manage your energy better. And this is kind of important because, we live in a culture where we're always on, we have emails flying in, we've back-to-back meetings, instant message, phone calls. Like it's very, very easy to kind of feel very overwhelmed for that kind of drain our energy. And that what forces us to do is to like constantly be multitasking or, flitting between tasks, which I know sometimes we have to do. But just to be mindful that, like studies have been done, and, task switching or multitasking can cost up to 40% of our productivity, which again will have an impact on our energy. So it's important we kind of have strategies to kind of maybe try to minimize this. And really what's important is, every day you kind of focus on, what's my important work that I need to get done today. And also understanding, what's the best time of day for me and how I feel to get this work done, and really try to ring fence that time around it. And now look, I'm sure a lot of you kind of use kind of diary blocking. That can be effective. Have block time for your work, block time for your meetings, even block time for when you're going to respond to your emails, and try to hold off looking at them until then. Or another topic as well, especially kind of like me, as in I can kind of have kind of perfectionism tendencies. It's kind of an 80% rule, where like if you're doing something and once you kind of meet that kind of 80% quality, that you can kind of stop and maybe move on to the next task. Because sometimes, the time and energy that it takes from you to get from your version of 80% to 100% can actually be quite a lot, and it's not really going to have much kind of impact on the actual work. You're better off kind of like focusing your kind of time and energy on the next task. And if you have time at the end, come back to it. But just be really kind of conscious of, when you're kind of over investing in work. And I think a key to make kind of this sort of stuff kind of work is kind of having that conversation with your kind of team, and see if you can kind of establish kind of some ground rules about kind of like how you guys interact and how you guys communicate. And this could be things like, maybe is there any days where you can maybe not have meetings, or can you make meetings shorter? What's the expectations about replying to emails? And even do kind of have that conversation about overtime and what's expected. And it might be a case, especially kind of in accounting, where like you probably might need kind of two different kind of sets of rules, maybe one kind of set of rules for kind of maybe the reporting time, the busy time, the year ends, and a different type of rule for when it's expected to be a little bit kind of less busier. And, the key here, and look, I know obviously, we work with a lot of stakeholders, And, sometimes we can't kind of control what they do. But again, it's coming back to like, what you can control and influence. And as a team, you'd expect the majority of your communication is with their team. And that's something we can work on. So if you're a manager, feel free to kind of start this kind of and take the lead in this. But also, even if you're not, like put up your hand, come with a plan, state the benefits, and even just offer to kind of to trial stuff, because, I think everyone kind of suffers from this. So I think everyone would be very welcome if there was any sorts of suggestions about how to kind of make this kind of things better and easier for everyone. So now we're going to move on to, I suppose, how we kind of boost our energy. And I'm going to talk about kind of specifically here breaks, and specifically around kind of micro breaks. And this is kind of something that I looked at the research in my master's. And so a micro break, what it is, it's really just like a short informal break between maybe like 1 and 15 minutes that you can kind of take, sporadically throughout the workday. And it's the type of thing that you can either be kind of quite structured about it, like maybe you kind of break it up if 25 minutes kind of work, 5 minutes rest. Or for me, I prefer just to kind of take it sporadically kind of as I need it. But there's been a lot of kind of research done on these, and they've been really kind of proven to reduce stress, boost your productivity, and therefore increase your energy. So it's kind of really important that we can kind of just kind of build them in, and like that they're so kind of quick, and you're not going to notice a minute or two gone, but you will notice kind of the effect that kind of has on your energy. And so I've set out a table here, and it kind of looks at at the different types of micro breaks that you can do for the different types of kind of energy. And I think what's key here is like, can you match the type of break you need to the energy that you're kind of feeling? And what I kind of mean by that is, just say you're kind of having a day where you're just really just kind of like mentally drained, you look at something really complex, instead of maybe rushing to kind of grab your phone, scroll on social media, which we all do. But like that essentially is just kind of bombarding your mind with a lot more information. What maybe is best is that maybe you actually kind of take yourself away from the screen. Even if it's just you close your eyes, take a few deep breaths. You don't even have to leave your desk, or if you can, just get up, go for a quick walk, minute or two, and you'll come back and it'll be a little bit more fresher. Whereas sometimes maybe if you're just having a really bad day, you're really frustrated, maybe it's something in the case where you kind of need to take a break that's kind of more focused on, processing those emotions. You could do things like, journaling. And, research has actually shown when we kind of put our feelings into words, it actually kind of calms that emotional response in our brain, in the amygdala. Or, sometimes we just need to talk to someone and have a chat and kind of get it off our chest. So kind of whatever it is that you kind of need, and just kind of realize that maybe that look kind of different every day. And I just want to also be clear that, these micro breaks aren't to replace your regular break. And I think it's something, I know I've been so guilty of this in the past, where, you don't take your break or you work through your lunch. And sometimes, I've been very influenced by what other people do. But then sometimes it's just like, I feel like, I kind of want to finish early, so I need to work through lunch. And look, we think that maybe we'll be more productive if we don't take it. But, I haven't really come across a single study that said that, you'll be more productive by not taking it. That's quite the opposite. So make sure that you're kind of putting in your kind of time in your day, in your calendar, and block that kind of lunch break out for yourself. And it's one of those things that even if you kind of are taking breaks, just be kind of conscious of kind of, again, I suppose, are you really taking a full break? And what I mean by that is, and even I'm guilty of this myself, sometimes like I'll be on my break, but I'll be on my phone, and maybe I'm still kind of letting kind of thoughts about kind of work pop into my mind. So I'm really actually not getting that an effective break. So really try to be a little bit more intentional about when you take your breaks. Even if it's just for a minute or two, just really try to just take yourself away from work and kind of make sure that you're kind of using that to kind of regulate your stress levels. And then we're going to kind of finish up more on just, I suppose, how we maximize our energy in our personal life. And I've kind of set out a list of kind of energy givers. And look, these are all core elements of your health that you'll all be familiar with. So it's exercise, healthy diet, good sleep, lots of time with family and friends, and kind of good hobbies. And I think everyone like is familiar with what they probably need to do to stay well. But I think it's probably more the case of asking yourself, like, are you doing enough to kind of fill yourself up? And if not, why? And again, we kind of need to come back to, the whys and the stories we're telling ourselves, and can we kind of challenge that a little bit? And look, there'll be very extremely valid reasons why, this kind of stuff gets kind of influenced and maybe put to the side. I know work is 100% one of those. And I kind of just wanted to touch on this, especially busy times like a year end or a busy season. Like, we obviously will have kind of a list of things we'd like to do in an ideal kind of setting that kind of, makes us kind of healthy and well and good energy. But sometimes we do kind of have to eat into that when we're in a busy time. But I think the key here is to know what your non-negotiables are to stay well. And what I mean by that is we need to become better at knowing what's the minimum things I need to do to kind of keep myself out of that kind of amber and red zone. And that will look different for everyone. So it could be a case of, you need your 7 hours sleep, or you need to get you to the gym twice a week. Like, everyone will be very kind of different. But when you establish this, you need to establish, again, and come back to boundaries, boundaries around this, so that you make sure that no matter what's happening, no matter how crazy work is, this is what you need to kind of stay well. And it might be a case that, like, you're not sure of what your non-negotiables are. And if it's a case that you find yourself kind of constantly drained, it might be a case you might need to look into this more, establish those non-negotiables. And this kind of stuff kind of comes about a lot of myself. It was just kind of trial and error, just really kind of tuning into how you're feeling, how you feel if you do X or Y, and you'll kind of really kind of just tune in and get a better understanding of what you need. And look, and again, I think, we all juggle a lot, and it can be quite hard to kind of know what to prioritize and what to kind of, to kind of change. But one thing I did years kind of, and it was very kind of useful, it was kind of like, a values and kind of time audit. And it kind of like basically kind of listed my values in life, and I listed my priorities, but then I also listed, hour by hour, over the space of a day, week, month, whatever, what I was spending on where I was spending my time. And I quickly kind of realized that even though like health well-being was my number one kind of priority, I was kind of constantly pushing myself when I was unwell, and friends and family was kind of my second priority. But there was often days where I would just kind of cancel that, at the drop of a hat if I thought something needed to be done at work. And really, I suppose when I reflected on this, what was kind of really driving me, which I really kind of wasn't aware of, was kind of how much of my, I suppose, my identity and my self-worth was kind of wrapped up in achievement, and especially achievement at work. And when I kind of had that realization, it kind of made me realize, well, okay, I need to kind of balance this out. And look, that's not to say that we shouldn't be ambitious and hardworking. I think we need to be that. I think that's really good, to be like that. But I think we also need to make sure that we have strategies, again, to get ourselves out of, well, first of all, stop ourselves getting into that kind of orange and red zone. But then when we kind of get there, that we know sometimes we do need to kind of shift our priorities and focus on our health and well-being more. So right, okay, so that kind of wraps things up. So look, yeah, I suppose today's talk was on about, how we kind of better manage our energy for better balance. And, our key jumping off point was understanding, where we are. And, was it the green, yellow, amber, red? And from there, it's all about kind of how you can build your strategies to kind of get yourself out of those kind of zones. And again, we looked at, what our energy drainers are at work, and what of those we can control or influence. Is it a case we need to change our mindset, establish more boundaries, or maybe kind of speak up more about it? And then we kind of touched on, I suppose, what can you actually do on a day-to-day basis to protect your energy a little bit better? Maybe it's a case of, maybe you can kind of block out kind of the noise a little bit better, or maybe it's a case we just, we add more micro breaks and breaks into our day. And then lastly, I suppose, are we kind of doing enough to kind of fill ourselves up in our personal life? And particularly, can we establish some non-negotiables that we can use to kind of stay well, especially in busy times? Now, look, I appreciate that. That's a lot of information thrown at you. So really what I'd like you to kind of reflect on, I suppose, is what was your key takeaway for today? But also, what's one thing you can put into action? Because I know sometimes you could think, okay, yeah, I could do 10 things. But sometimes if we kind of overwhelm ourselves, we're not going to make that change. So even if you're going to say one thing, and this could be as simple as, I'm going to start doing like micro breaks, start my workday. Or maybe it's a case that, the next time I think, oh yeah, I'm going to work late, I kind of stop, pause and think, okay, what's driving that? And, do I actually have the energy for that? Do I feel well enough? Or do I actually need to kind of focus on work? So whatever that is, just try to kind of understand what your kind of key takeaway is and what one thing you can put into action. So that was everything for me. I hope you guys found that helpful. And yeah, I suppose we can kind of kick things off with the Q&A.
Gillian, thank you so much. Wow, there's just so much to take away there. I love all the practical tips. And I love the fact that this is really all about, I mean, in a nutshell, it's about just taking back control and not sort of sleepwalking through your day and just doing everything that's kind of thrown at you, and taking a bit more, having a bit more autonomy over your day, being intentional about some of those actions that you talked about. And the battery thing is brilliant. Just such an easy thing to kind of conjure up in your mind. Oh, my battery's getting a bit flat. I need to put some of those things into action. So absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. There's so much there. And we have already got some questions in here. I'd love to just kick off, because I'm sure there's going to be a few of them.
Yeah.
So someone's saying that was so amazing, really succinct messaging and practical advice. Thanks also for your openness and regarding your own burnout. And I'd have to echo that as well. That's a tough conversation and a tough thing to admit, particularly to a big audience like this today. But it's really beneficial. You've been through that journey that I think a lot of people here today are struggling with, and I think to hear that you've come out the other side and started your own business, the whole thing, you know, there is life beyond that kind of burnout,
Yeah.
and that, you know, kind of dark times, let's say. So it's fantastic to see that. There's another question here as well. Thank you so much, Gillian. I'm trying my best with all of the suggestions that you make, but my
Yeah.
one problem is my manager. I don't seem to be having any traction with getting, you know, a better
Yeah.
work-life balance. So maybe just something there around, you know, the challenge being the manager is the blocker. So any tips on
Yeah.
that?
And for sure, like when you look at kind of what causes people stress, I think the manager is the second most kind of biggest cause of stress. And it's a lot of things we kind of struggle with. The key here, I think, one is kind of, are we being kind of just completely honest? Can we kind of give kind of constructive feedback? Because sometimes, like, you know, people have the best intentions, but maybe we're just not aware of, you know, how what we're doing as a manager can impact people. So sometimes it can be really kind of helpful to kind of point these things out. And hopefully you kind of might kind of get that that person might be like, okay, yeah, I need to change a little. But if it's a case where like you've really been kind of tried all you can kind of do, and you know you're doing all the things you can to kind of put things into perspective, your mindset, and communicate what you can. Don't go back to don't afraid to go back and kind of have that kind of second conversation to look to be like, I've kind of hit a wall here. And just kind of really kind of just be kind of very kind of open and honest about kind of how you're struggling. And if it's the case, like hopefully that would help. Like you'd really want to try to avoid going to the case of maybe you have to go over their head or to HR or something. So I really would just kind of focus on yeah, kind of what kind of communication you can have with them, and try to be kind of honest about how you're feeling. Although I know that's kind of easier said than done, and there's a lot of kind of fear there, kind of which I talked about, which is it's totally kind of valid. But really kind of I think we kind of need to kind of get better at trying to be a bit more kind of vocal, because I think sometimes I know I've been the case, I kind of expect people to read my mind, and kind of think like me and act like me, and sometimes it's a case where maybe people just aren't aware, and then sometimes it is people just are a little bit more pragmatic, and we kind of need to maybe take a different route with that.
Great advice. And I think also, you know, we've all been there. We've all had that manager. I'm not talking about my present role, by the way, but we've all had that manager over the years that is, you know,
Yeah.
tricky. Let's say there's just a personality clash, or there might be fear on their part, or they're under pressure, whatever the case may be. So maybe something that's worked for me is, you know, that peer-to-peer support. So like there mightn't be the manager that's going to support you, but you could get support and help from a peer. And I think also if
Sure.
there's a team meeting environment, it's, having them speak up on your behalf, or just, when you bring something up around, workload or whatever the case may be, deadlines or whatever is the issue, that they're chipping in as well. So you have that support in the room, as opposed to it's just them and you and the manager having this kind of,
Yeah, for sure. And I think because it's the case that we kind of do kind of bottle up these things sometimes, and we kind of aren't like very kind of forthcoming about it, that we kind of don't realize that everyone's actually probably thinking the same thing. Everyone's probably experiencing the same thing. It's just maybe sometimes we're like afraid to say it. So you're totally right, is and having that kind of peer support, talking about it more. And sometimes it's kind of a case where if a lot of people are saying it, versus one person, then maybe again that manager might kind of think, okay, well maybe I kind of need to change and stuff.
yeah.
And
And
again,
actually, on that point, sorry to cut across you, Gillian,
oh
just
no,
as
of
an
course.
interesting point there from Noreen, who's come in and said, interesting discussion and very helpful. Some managers simply don't care as long as they look like they are doing their part, but
Yeah,
never to be afraid to go above their head if they are the boss, and it's simply a time to jump ship. So, there's only so much you can do in that environment. And if you really
yeah,
are struggling, and if you're leading yourself towards burnout, maybe it is time to
yeah,
draw a line and just
for
protect yourself.
sure.
Nothing is
And
worth.
and that's why I kind of say like focus on what you can control and influence. But then if you can't, it's kind of that question, as you said, is like, can you accept that? And sometimes we don't need to accept that. Like sometimes,
Exactly.
like this would be the last resort, but sometimes it's just we need to remove ourselves from that environment and just, you
Yeah,
know, to
absolutely.
normalize that
Take
as
back
well. And
control.
that's absolutely okay. Yeah, take back the
Yeah.
control.
And Joseph, just I see you've joined us there in the discussion. Just would you have anything? I know you've recently changed roles and you're now very happy in a new role. You were talking there about they seem to have struck a good balance with work-life balance in your new company. Do you want to just maybe share some of the things that they're
Yeah,
doing?
yeah. Well, I agree with Gillian. Like when I was leaving my old job, there was like certain boundaries I knew I wanted when I moved into a new role. And luckily for me, I found a job. But flexi time, more working from home, or early finish on Fridays, which obviously that's not everyone's going to find that. But I think when you know what you want, then you can make the compromises you're willing to make, but also try and target what you feel is most important to you. And I think that's really good advice that Gillian gave, is like knowing your own boundaries, because that's going to set you in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. So true.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's so good. So the other thing just to say as well, Gillian, just because you are now really an expert in this area and you've done your master's in this area as well, that people should absolutely follow Gillian on LinkedIn, and you've set up your own company as well. And I know that you've also engaged with our student cohort as well. So you've attended some of the training sessions and the content sessions that we have for our students. So just to keep in touch with you, and there's obviously more content and more webinars, and the program continues on into the autumn. So please do keep in touch with us. If there's anything else that people are looking for, get in touch with the Thrive team. Obviously, Joseph has given a great roundup there of what is going on in the ACA professionals community as well. So there's a lot of great stuff going on in the Institute. So I think that's we're coming up to the minute, a couple of minutes left, but just to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. A really, really insightful session, and you'll get the slides, you'll get the recording as well. Feel free to pass it on to your colleagues and people in your network as well. And please keep engaged with the Institute. Come and join us. Come and see other events that are happening in the Institute. It really is a great way to network and progress in your career and get that peer-to-peer support that we were talking about today as well. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a great Wednesday. Thank you to both of our speakers, and thanks to Chris behind the scenes. Take care, everyone.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.